9. Dylan's confession. The scene offers a profoundly raw and intimate exploration of trauma, loyalty, and survival amidst the brutal realities of war and addiction in The King's Omen. It highlights the psychological toll of PTSD, ADD, and the strain of camaraderie, and the moral complexities inherent in life and death decisions. Immersive emotional and psychological depth. Roscoe's repeated flashbacks and panic, gripping a gun and yelling, illustrate the overwhelming presence of trauma. His violent reaction to Dylan's entrance reveals how deeply his suffering alienates him, and his subsequent embarrassment exposes vulnerability beneath hardened defenses. The scene powerfully captures lived PTSD symptoms, nightmares, fear, shame, and fluctuating control. Dylan's empathetic response and physical comfort portray deep brotherhood and mutual understanding rooted in shared trauma. Their dialogue reveals the profound isolation veterans feel, as well as the limitations of traditional counseling in addressing such deep wounds. Themes of trauma and coping, addiction and mental health. Dylan's candid admission of a lifetime of breakdowns, drug use, and the battle with ADD complements Roscoe's PTSD struggle, creating parallel stories of pain and coping through substances. Moral ambiguity and violence. Discussion of Dylan's killing of civilians during downtime introduces the blurred lines between combat necessity and moral responsibility, underscoring the dehumanizing effects war imposes. Brotherhood and loyalty. The characters' mutual promises to protect each other, cover up crimes, and prevent self-harm underscore the weight of survival bonds formed in extreme circumstances. Symbolic and narrative elements. The gun, a physical and symbolic centerpiece representing power, vulnerability, and the threat of self-destruction. Voices and mental struggles. The conversation about hearing voices and the burden of ADD adds complexity to how mental health is portrayed, breaking stereotypes. Cover-up of violence. The calculated swapping of service weapons and denial of responsibility reveals systemic corruption and the futility of justice within war zones. Character development and dynamics. Roscoe is portrayed as a haunted figure wrestling with the ghosts of his past and the fragility of his mental state. Dylan acts as a flawed but steadfast protector, aware of his own demons yet committed to preserving life and sanity. Their candid exchanges emphasize humanizing dimensions often glossed over: fear, dependency, hope, and despair. Thematic resonance. The scene encapsulates the novel's overarching themes: the cyclical nature of violence, the complex costs of survival, and the search for humanity amid chaos. The juxtaposition of casual drug talk with deadly crimes and psychological breakdowns reveals a layered commentary on the effects of war beyond the battlefield. This powerful scene richly contributes to The King's Omen's exploration of trauma's enduring shadows, the bonds forged in adversity, and the moral ambiguities that define survival in violent environments. 10. Jasmine's unfortunate tryout. This scene vividly captures the emotional and psychological dimensions of competition, vulnerability, and power struggle between Katrina and Jasmine during the tryouts, offering a rich exploration of character contrasts and social dynamics in The King's Omen. Detailed descriptive overview. Katrina's performance is described as shining and wonderful, earning her the teacher's props, a moment of triumph and validation that highlights her confidence and skill. Her solitary presence in the audience places her in a position of control and observation, emphasizing her detachment and dominance in the situation. Jasmine's entrance starkly contrasts with Katrina's poised confidence. Jasmine appears physically and emotionally drained, sick as a dog, nervous, exhausted, sweaty, and barely able to stand. This vivid description immediately evokes sympathy, portraying her vulnerability and the pressure she faces. Jasmine's raspy, off-key singing underscores her compromised state, reinforcing Katrina's secret use of a lethal toxic to disrupt Jasmine's performance. The music director's concerned inquiry into Jasmine's well-being further amplifies the tension and highlights the gravity of Jasmine's condition. Jasmine's insistence that she is fine, despite obvious signs of distress, illustrates her determination, but also denial, reflecting the pressures young performers face to appear resilient. Emotional and competitive dynamics, triumph and schadenfreude, Katrina's sarcastic giggles and triumphant smile as Jasmine falters reveal a darker aspect of rivalry, rooted in past conflicts and power imbalances. Her internal victory is not just about skill, but about total and utter dominance. Judgment and compassion. The music teacher's gentle yet firm advice to rest contrasts with Katrina's mocking tone, illustrating the varied responses individuals receive in moments of weakness. Isolation. Katrina's solitary cheering contrasts with Jasmine on stage solo, while not present, has a supporting group of genuine friends who will console her during this rough period of her life. While Jasmine has friends, Katrina's support derives from self-assurance and control rather than companionship. Themes and symbolism, performance and identity. The tryout becomes a battleground for personal validation and identity assertion, especially for two rivals with complex histories. Physical and emotional exhaustion. Jasmine's physical symptoms, along with Katrina's secret tampering, symbolize the internal battles many endure unseen, linking physical health with emotional resilience, couple that with an illness she knows nothing about. Power and revenge. Katrina's victory smile echoes earlier scenes of manipulation and scheming, reinforcing an ongoing narrative of control and retribution. Narrative function. This scene propels the tension between Katrina and Jasmine to a public stage, making visible their personal conflict and the stakes involved. The interplay of skill, vulnerability, rivalry, and borderline criminal activities encapsulates broader themes of power, corruption of youth, and an unforgiving will to succeed. 11. Detox. This scene is a powerful exploration of addiction, trauma, and the moral complexity surrounding survival and choices in The King's Omen. It vividly portrays the harsh realities faced by Roscoe and Dylan, highlighting their struggle to cope with past violence and current desperation. Detailed descriptive overview. The scene opens with Roscoe's irritation at Dylan bringing an unexpected third person to their drug session, immediately setting a tone of tension and territorial control. Roscoe's frustration escalates as the stranger uses too much heroin, threatening the intimacy and relief the night was supposed to provide. Their dialogue reveals the deep emotional wounds inflicted by their shared traumatic past, specifically the torture Roscoe endured, highlighting how memories both haunt and bond them. The sudden overdose of the third man shocks the group, vividly described through Dylan's repeated, frantic attempts to rouse their friend and the horrifying physical convulsions and heroin leaking from his mouth. This visceral moment is laden with fear, helplessness, and urgency, emphasizing the deadly stakes of their lifestyle. Themes of trauma and survival, addiction as escape and trap. The heroin use is both a temporary bomb and a destructive force. The character's dependency is framed as a means to numb psychological pain, but it also accelerates their decline. Death and consequence. The overdose death brings the immediate consequence of their lifestyle into stark relief. Their hurried decision to bury the man secretly underscores the desperation and illegality surrounding their lives. Moral ambiguity and reflection. Dylan's curiosity about entering drug dealing presents a conflicted aspiration. While one seeks money and control, the other fears perpetuating the cycle of destruction they live in. War and displacement. Their presence in France, far from home and embroiled in violence, amplifies their sense of alienation and ongoing struggle for survival. Symbolism and emotional texture. The overdose represents the thin line between life and death in a world fueled by substances, underscoring the fragility of existence in chaotic environments. The burial, a grim ritual that symbolizes the weight of loss and the erasure of evidence, both literal and figurative, of their pain and choices. Drug use and conversation. The act of using drugs together is both a bonding ritual and a destructive habit, reflecting the paradox of connection amid decay. Character development and narrative significance. Roscoe and Dylan's interactions reveal layered personalities torn between seeking control and succumbing to circumstance. Their conversation about drug dealing introduces potential future paths marked by power struggles, survival instincts, and moral dilemmas, deepening the narrative tension. This scene foregrounds the personal cost of systemic issues, war, addiction, racial and class struggles, humanizing those often marginalized and overlooked. The scene is a critical, emotionally charged moment underscoring the King's Omen's examination of trauma, survival, and the difficult choices that define its characters' lives. 12. Playing with fire. This scene vividly portrays Roland's struggle with inner turmoil, fear, and mistrust, set against the backdrop of a school environment that both notices and tries to intervene in the challenges faced by a young boy from a troubled family. Detailed descriptive overview. The scene opens with Roland lighting a piece of paper on fire while sitting on the school steps, a symbolic act of rebellion, frustration, or a cry for help. The slow burning of the paper draws the eye and creates a tense mood, heightened by the arrival of a teacher who abruptly extinguishes the fire. The teacher's sudden intervention contrasts with the slow, contemplative destruction Roland initiates, symbolizing the attempt of authority to control or suppress the emotional and behavioral expressions of youth. Roland's dialogue with the teacher reveals layers of defensiveness, guardedness, and skepticism toward authority. His witty, sarcastic remarks about smoking cigarettes and dismissive attitude toward the teacher's concern convey a young person trying to protect himself, wary of adults and institutions he perceives as unsympathetic or threatening. Exploration of themes, fear and mistrust. Roland's reluctance to trust the teacher highlights his fear of repercussions and his deeper concerns rooted in family dynamics. His insistence on secrecy about what his father has done reveals a deep-seated fear and possibly unspoken trauma. Family dysfunction. Indirect references to his father's strange and frightening behavior suggest an environment of instability and possibly emotional or psychological abuse, adding gravity to Roland's situation beyond his disciplinary problems at school. Youth and rebellion. The act of setting paper on fire represents a form of rebellion and a physical manifestation of pent-up anger or helplessness. Institutional role. The teacher's role oscillates between authority figure and potential support system. Her willingness to wait for Roland shows care, yet Roland's skepticism stains the promise of help with doubt. Symbolism and emotional texture. The burning paper, a metaphor for frustration, destruction, and the desire to purge or escape troubling emotions. The teacher's intervention represents societal attempts to control or manage troubling youth behavior, but also offers a potential, if tenuous, lifeline. Roland's sarcasm, a defense mechanism to mask vulnerability and to keep control of a situation where he feels powerless. Mention of the guidance counselor reflects child protective systems and their complicated role, simultaneously a threat and a hope. Narrative significance and character insight. This scene provides critical insight into Roland's troubled mind and youth marked by family instability. It reveals his complex relationship with authority, balancing need, mistrust, and instinct to protect himself psychologically. The scene sets up future conflict and development related to his family and personal growth, while underpinning themes of childhood trauma and institutional intervention essential to the King's Omen. Roland's guarded dialogue and behavior evoke empathy, showing a child on the edge trying to assert control in a chaotic environment. This detailed, tense interaction richly contributes to the portrayal of familial and social struggle, highlighting emotional depth and thematic resonance in the King's Omen. 13. Roscoe becomes a power player. This scene is a richly layered exploration of power, cultural contrast, trust, and ambition within the international drug trade in the King's Omen. It reveals Roscoe's entry into a larger, more sophisticated criminal world and highlights important thematic tensions and character dynamics. Vivid descriptive overview. The opulence of the French Connect Kiki Lawrence mansion, flooded with beautiful women, instantly sets a tone of luxury and success, attracting attention to the material rewards of drug trafficking. Roscoe's surprised that the Connect is Black challenges stereotypes and expectations, opening a nuanced conversation about identity and power in illicit enterprises. Keandre's confident, charismatic demeanor coupled with his expansive control over drug supply positions him as an important gatekeeper, both feared and respected in the drug trade hierarchy. His comments about the middleman's invisibility contrast with his obvious display of wealth, emphasizing themes of power hidden behind layers. Themes of trust and power, power as influence and wealth. Keandre's wealth is framed as the fruit of strategic alliances and calculated invisibility, reflecting the complex economics of global drug networks. Cultural and racial identity. The dialogue around race and racism, particularly Keandre's perspective on being Black in France versus America, adds depth to the story's exploration of systemic and cultural power structures. Caution and evidence of experience. Keandre's suspicion about Roscoe's reliability underscores the precarious nature of trust in illegal operations. His emphasis on proof and loyalty reveals a ruthless business mindset. Ambition and redemption. Roscoe's narrative of overcoming addiction and seeking leadership reflects themes of personal transformation and the struggle to redefine one's identity amid chaos. Symbolism and emotional texture. The mansion and zoo, symbols of power and control, wealth and luxury juxtaposed with the hint of untamed aggression represented by the nearby zoo. The briefcase of drugs, a tangible representation of risk, trust, and the potential for both profit and death, setting the stakes high for Roscoe's future. Dialogue of loyalty and vices. The conversation interweaves promises, threats, and fears, underscoring the thin line between survival, success, and downfall. Character dynamics and narrative significance. Roscoe's interaction with Keandre marks a crucial turning point, positioning him from a small-scale user and survivor to an aspiring player in a high-stakes international game. Their negotiation captures the precarious balance between trust, vigilance, and ambition, while foreshadowing future struggles for power, loyalty, and survival. This scene deepens Roscoe's character arc, emphasizing his resilience, ambition, and the moral tensions he faces. Keandre functions as a foil and mentor figure, both an opportunity and a warning. This deeply evocative scene is a pivotal moment that broadens the King's Omen's thematic scope, intersecting race, power, identity, and the global reach of the drug trade, while intensifying character motivations and stakes. 14. A conversation with the devil. This scene offers a nuanced, psychologically rich portrait of Bruce's inner world, revealing his complex emotional armor, his experiences with workplace hostility, and the ways he navigates social interactions while concealing deeper pain and anger. Detailed descriptive overview. Bruce sits alone in the break room eating lunch, his lack of engagement with his food mirroring his mental distance from the present moment. The arrival of a coworker and his sympathetic complaints about their boss, Nick, initially register only faintly with Bruce, whose stare is vacant and reflective. This disconnection signifies Bruce's internal preoccupations and emotional shielding. As the coworker expresses anger and disgust toward Nick's abusive behavior, especially highlighting offensive remarks about Bruce's family, Bruce's response sharply shifts the tone. His transformation from passive listener to an intense, cold figure reveals a powerful emotional undercurrent. The comparison of Bruce's glare to the expression that Satan would make if he were to be loosened from his chains in hell vividly captures the terrifying, almost mythic quality of his suppressed rage and pain. Psychological and social tensions, power and intimidation. Bruce's sudden coldness and pointed questions create a fleeting moment of dominance, shifting the power dynamic in the conversation and unsettling his well-meaning coworker. Anger and vulnerability. Beneath the icy exterior is a man deeply wounded by years of disrespect and personal pain, especially related to his family and his boss's cruelty. Use of religious imagery. Bruce's references to biblical verses and the devil introduce a layered metaphorical framework, suggesting he wrestles with notions of good and evil, judgment, and justice within himself and his environment. Defensive humor and control. Bruce's closing remark about staying in character and his covert smile after the coworker's departure show how he uses humor and controlled intimidation to manage social situations and maintain psychological safety. Symbolism and emotional texture. The break room, a liminal space where social bonds form, but also where isolation and tension bubble beneath the surface. Bruce's cold stare symbolizes the internalized fury and protective barriers he erects against a hostile world. Religious allegory. The conversation about angels, demons, and judgment evokes themes of moral struggle, identity, and redemption. Coworkers' mixed reactions. When Bruce asks the man if he was sure that Nick was the most evil man he met, and what he would say if we're talking to the devil, and Bruce's twisting of biblical verses about being entertained by angels, instead referencing to being equally entertained by demons, makes the coworker visibly uncomfortable, and he is rendered to an uncomfortable, forced, awkward laugh, because he does not know how to take Bruce's dark logic. The mixture of laughter and discomfort from the coworker reinforces the unsettling power Bruce holds even when he appears disengaged. Narrative and character insights. This scene deepens the portrayal of Bruce not merely as a victim of workplace abuse, but as a complex figure wielding psychological power when necessary while grappling with pain and hope. It highlights his capacity for controlled anger, strategic social interactions, and underlying resentment toward his boss. The religious undertones add philosophical depth, hinting at Bruce's internal moral reckoning and resilience. This moment enriches the novel's exploration of personal dignity amid oppression and the subtle, often hidden, forms of strength individuals deploy to navigate difficult environments. 15. Somebody informs on Roscoe Brady. This scene delves deeply into themes of trust, paranoia, loyalty, and survival within the military context in The King's Omen. It portrays the precarious balance Roscoe and Dylan must maintain while navigating a fraught environment filled with suspicion and betrayal. Detailed descriptive overview. The scene opens with Roscoe and Dylan discussing the growing drug market and their personal struggles with addiction and coping mechanisms, revealing their vulnerability and the ongoing battle with their dependencies. Their candid conversation about the itch and how they manage their conditions humanizes them, offering a window into the psychological toll of their lives. The sudden intrusion of the soldier dramatically shifts the atmosphere to tension and distrust. The soldier's loud entrance, interrupting their private conversation, symbolizes the invasive and unpredictable nature of military life and the pressures Roscoe and Dylan face under constant surveillance. Their exchange reveals the underlying fear and paranoia about loyalty and trust, both essential and elusive commodities. Themes of trust and paranoia, accusation and allegiance. The soldier's blunt declaration that he knows what you guys are up to introduces a threat to Roscoe's and Dylan's operations. His claim that he wants dibs on the business in a desperate bid for money highlights personal motivations entwined with suspicion and ambition. Isolation and surveillance. Roscoe's suspicion about the soldier's true intentions, possibly being sent by Keandre to test loyalty, underscores the precarious nature of their power and secrecy. Military hierarchy and bureaucracy. The soldiers later report to the captain, and the captain's cautious response encapsulate the challenges of justice within military institutions, balancing proof requirements against rumors and internal politics. Symbolism and emotional texture. The office setting represents a microcosm of power struggles, secrecy, and the fragile trust that binds or breaks alliances. Door and entrance. The loud, unexpected intrusion symbolizes the fragile barriers protecting personal space and trust, easily breached by suspicion. Tension-filled dialogue. The careful words, abrupt interruptions, and nonverbal cues reveal layered power plays and deep-seated anxieties. The captain's reaction, ambivalence, and bureaucratic caution highlight institutional paralysis and the complexities of command. Character insights and narrative significance. Roscoe's steady leadership contrasts with Dylan's supportive role, illustrating a dynamic where both rely on each other to navigate internal and external threats. The soldier represents a wild card, embodying desperation and opportunism, while the captain's skepticism embodies institutional pragmatism. This scene heightens the stakes for Roscoe and Dylan, showcasing the constant threat of exposure and the need for vigilance. It advances the narrative tension through themes of loyalty, betrayal, and survival within a corrupt and dangerous system. This tense, layered encounter enriches the King's Omen's exploration of power dynamics, psychological strain, and the complex interplay between individual agency and institutional control. 16. Bruce secretly plotting revenge. This scene is a raw and intense window into Bruce's tortured psyche, exposing the dangerous depths of his anger and the emotional turmoil fueled by his toxic relationship with Nick and the trauma involving his daughter. Detailed descriptive overview. Bruce sits in his car after work, physically removed but emotionally engulfed by rage. The imagery of his hands crushing the crumpled money from an earlier scene with the racist mob signifies pent-up frustration and the corrosive effect of his circumstances. The money, soaked with his sweat and gripping, is a powerful physical metaphor for his emotional and psychological state, tightly held but increasingly oppressive. The presence of Nick joking with associates outside the car contrasts starkly with Bruce's quiet fury, magnifying the isolation and resentment Bruce experiences. His whispered curses and violent fantasies, following Nick home, choking him out, portray how deeply bruised and volatile Bruce has become. These dark thoughts are not mere anger. They resonate with maniacal, sadistic undertones, revealing a man on the brink of losing control. Bruce's self-awareness, caught via the rearview mirror reflecting his sadistic and maniacal expression, demonstrates the tension between his humanity and his darker impulses. His quick look away is a moment of fragile self-preservation, acknowledging the monster threatening to surface. Emotional and psychological themes, internal violence and rage. Bruce's whispered monologue voice is a simmering storm of rage and helplessness, focusing on the insult to his family as the catalyst for his violent fantasies. Powerlessness and wrath. The act of crushing money symbolizes his feelings of powerlessness in the face of Nick's abuse and the systemic injustices weighing on him. Duality of self. Bruce's tension between his sadistic inner self and the calm exterior shows a battle for control, highlighting psychological fragility. Triggered trauma. References to his daughter amplify the personal stakes and the emotional pain underlying his rage, fueling a willingness to cross moral lines. Symbolism and narrative importance. The money, more than currency, it becomes a symbol of both survival and frustration, material necessity entangled in emotional ruin. The car as sanctuary and prison. Bruce's car confines him physically, but offers space for private torment and reflection. Nick is a catalyst. The symbolic focus on Nick externalizes Bruce's rage and represents larger antagonistic forces in Bruce's life. Character and story arc insight. This scene marks a critical moment of psychological tension for Bruce, showcasing the volatility beneath his surface calm. It foreshadows potential escalation in his conflict with Nick, suggesting an impending eruption if Bruce's life continues unbalanced. His awareness of his menace indicates potential for self-destructive behavior or transformation. It enhances the narrative's exploration of trauma, rage, and dignity crushed under systemic and interpersonal cruelty. Bruce emerges as a deeply conflicted figure, a man caught between rage and restraint, survival and self-destruction. 17. Old Man Bruce explains Roscoe's fate. This scene functions as a pivotal narrative exposition, delivered through Old Man Bruce recounting crucial developments in Roscoe's life, the drug trade, and broader geopolitical power dynamics within the King's Omen. It blends personal history with organized crime's complex ecosystem, creating layers of thematic and character-driven meaning. Analytical overview. Old Man Bruce's narration provides a retrospective lens on key events, Roscoe's arrest, imprisonment, and rise within the drug empire under Keandre's tentative support. This perspective offers a mixture of factual recount and subtle commentary, revealing the intricate webs of loyalty, betrayal, survival, and business acumen operating beneath surface events. Thematic dimensions, loyalty and betrayal. The detailed account of Roscoe serving time without ratting illustrates the code of silence and loyalty valued in these circles, emphasizing honor amongst criminals as a binding social code despite external laws. Leadership and power. Roscoe's transition from prisoner to overseer, running a paramilitary styled organization, demonstrates themes of power consolidation and militarization, reflecting how trauma and past experiences shape leadership styles. Political intrigue and corruption. References to figures like Governor Rudolph, Mayor McNally, Police Commissioner Barrington, and their alliances or conflicts with drug lords bring the story into the sphere of political corruption, hinting at systemic entanglement. Family and business. Bruce's mention of his mother's complicated relationship with criminal enterprises highlights personal ties intersecting with business, showing how family dynamics influence and are shaped by broader power struggles. Territorial control and conflict. The tensions among different factions, the brothers, Marcelins, Broussards, underscore themes of competition, violence, and uneasy truces shaping the local crime landscape. Character insight. Bruce as historian and insider. Old man Bruce assumes the role of narrator, storyteller, and possibly moral observer, providing context and nuance to events, bridging past and present. Roscoe's evolution. Portrayed as a complex figure with both pragmatic leadership and a ruthless approach reminiscent of feared historical groups like Los Peeps, his character embodies transformation wrought by circumstance and survival instinct. Dylan's adaptation. His evolution into de facto boss during Roscoe's absence indicates resilience and capacity for leadership, maintaining order amid chaos until Roscoe's return. Narrative function. This scene serves as an essential narrative anchor, summarizing backstory, fleshing out character arcs, and linking personal histories to larger structural forces within the novel. It contextualizes ongoing power struggles and personal motivations, setting stage for subsequent conflict and development. Conclusion. This reflective monologue encapsulates the multifaceted nature of power, loyalty, and survival in the King's Omen, intertwining personal pain with broader social and political corruption. It deepens understanding of key characters and lays groundwork for emerging conflicts, highlighting the cyclical and interconnected nature of crime, family, and authority. 18. Roscoe and Dylan reflect on current events. This scene is a tense and richly layered exploration of paranoia, leadership pressure, loyalty, and survival in the criminal underworld, offering rich psychological and thematic detail within the King's Omen. Immersive descriptive overview. The setting of Roscoe's bar in Cincinnati creates a charged atmosphere, public yet private, where business and personal anxieties collide. Roscoe's unusual lack of appetite, a poignant detail given his love for spaghetti, subtly reflects his inner turmoil and growing unease. His sharp eyes tracking every passerby build a palpable tension, a visual manifestation of his paranoia. The dialogue oscillates between moments of dark humor, Dylan teasing Roscoe as the old man, and grave discussions about the ramifications of a snitch within their network. This contrast underscores the stress and uncertainty shadowing their lives. Roscoe's detailed worries about alliances with the Black Royalty Connection, BRC, the brothers, the Marcelins, and the Broussards highlight the precarious balance of power and the constant threat of violence they face. Themes of paranoia and leadership, paranoia and surveillance. Roscoe's obsession with watching the doors, suspecting every passerby, and the resurgence of his tics and flashbacks reveal how deeply paranoia shapes his daily existence. This psychological strain echoes his past trauma and the persistent danger his role entails. Leadership pressure and uncertainty. Roscoe's concern about succession battles, whether Cleotis or Flo will rise, the respect commanded by lineage, like Angie and Lysandra's fathers, reflects the unstable politics within their world and challenges to his authority. Loyalty and betrayal. The discourse around the informer and potential retribution explores the fragile trust that underpins their criminal enterprise, emphasizing the brutal consequences of betrayal. Brotherhood and support. Dylan's casual demeanor and attempts to lighten the mood provide a counterbalance, showing the camaraderie and loyalty that sustain them, even as tension mounts. Symbolism and emotional texture. The cheese fries, a small, almost trivial detail, Dylan's snatching of fries contrasts with Roscoe's inability to eat, symbolizing distraction, care, and the grinding severity of their situation. The bar as a fortress. The establishment symbolizes not just a business, but a stronghold needing vigilant defense, a microcosm of the wider war for survival. Conversation as strategy. Their talk functions as both a vent and a strategic session, weaving personal anxieties with cold pragmatic calculations. Character insights and narrative impact. Roscoe emerges as a seasoned yet haunted leader grappling with the dual burdens of external threats and internal fears. His vigilance is not just practicality, but a manifestation of trauma and the mental weight of command. Dylan's role as both an anchor and foil explores how loyalty and differing temperaments interact in high-stress situations. The scene deepens the reader's understanding of the fragile alliances and perilous lives in organized crime, revealing how power and paranoia intertwine to shape identity and decisions. 19. The tragic reveal of Jasmine health crisis. This scene powerfully conveys guilt, fear, moral conflict, and social tension among teenagers at Collinwood High School, offering a vivid, emotionally charged portrait of personal and community consequences within the King's Omen. Rich descriptive overview. The scene begins in Mr. Stewart's science class with an ominous announcement about Principal Watkins' daughter Jasmine's critical health condition, triggering immediate physical and emotional reactions in Caleb. His uncontrollable vomiting and urgent retreat to the bathroom reveal his overwhelming anxiety and guilt, conveyed through visceral imagery like shattered glass and flowing blood that mirror his fractured psyche. The rawness of his breakdown, bawling uncontrollably and self-harm, emphasizes the profound weight he carries. The intrusion of a fellow student heightens Caleb's isolation, as he lashes out in panic and shame, underscoring adolescent vulnerability and the harsh social judgments faced in a school environment. Themes of guilt and moral conflict. Guilt and responsibility. Caleb is tormented by his role in Jasmine's incapacitation. His repeated pleas and emotional outbursts centering on what he's done highlight intense remorse and self-blame. Cynicism versus compassion. Kat's more callous, pragmatic stance contrasts sharply with Caleb's distress. Her cynicism and dismissal, calling the situation temporary and somewhat humorous, reflect coping mechanisms rooted in survival and detachment, revealing moral ambiguity. Fear of exposure. Their dialogue explores the risk of being caught, suspicion from peers and authorities, and the fragile secrecy surrounding their involvement, heightening tension. Race and socioeconomic context. References to their school locale and racial identity. We ain't out in Pepper Pike. Nobody gives a damn about kids in the hood expose structural neglect and marginalization, suggesting systemic injustice that complicates their predicament and limits trust in institutional protection. Symbolism and emotional texture. Shattered glass and blood symbolizes Caleb's fractured mental state, inner turmoil, and the irreversible damage caused by their actions. The mirror, reflecting a million reflections, evokes layered identities, fractured self-perception, and the multiplicity of consequences stemming from a single act. Bandaged hand, a visible sign of self-inflicted pain tied directly to emotional agony. The act of pulling Kat away suggests urgency, desperation for honesty, and a plea for moral reckoning. Character and narrative insights. Caleb's raw vulnerability contrasts with Kat's hardened pragmatism, showcasing differing responses to trauma within their social reality. Their fraught interaction illuminates the psychological cost of the venom they created and the guilt that threatens to unravel them. This scene functions as a critical emotional and thematic pivot, intensifying the narrative stakes by personalizing the fallout of their actions, forcing questions about accountability, friendship, and the sometimes cruel demands of survival in marginalized contexts.